I have a wonderful guest here. Let me tell y'all a little bit about her. When I started the show almost 3 years ago, she was one of the people who came onto the show. I had never met her, and we've been in communication for almost 3 years now. But she was one of the wonderful people who said, yeah, I'll come on your show and I'll talk about what I do. And I was so just in awe with her because she is a woman of mathematics. And I'm like, yes, wow. So she was telling me she was writing a book, and I was excited about that. And her book is now out, and she's from Connecticut. So that means she came in not just to be with me, but to do some other things here in Texas. And when I asked her about being here, I'm like, well, you coming on the show while you're here? She said, yeah, come on. So I'm in love. So we have Dr. Shelly Jones, and she is here from Connecticut. And she said it was warmer in Connecticut than it is here in Texas. So, Shelly, say hello to our guest.
Hello, guest. Hello. I'm so glad to be here, Mary. Like you said, I feel like I know you.
I know.
I met you a few years ago by doing the show and calling in. And now I'm here in person. And so I'm just really glad to be here and to meet you in person.
Finally, we feel like we already family.
Yes,
Can you lift your mic up just a little bit? Because I want to make sure people get your voice. Yeah. All right. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I started at Spelman College in
Wait a minute,
Atlanta,
you were at
Georgia.
Spelman?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to let you go.
I'm a 1986 graduate of Spelman College, and I actually started in the dual degree program, computer science and computer engineering. But I ended with a computer science degree and went on to do some programming with Ma Bell. And it became US West in Omaha, Nebraska. And that was how I started out. And I decided that I didn't want to be a programmer because I'm a social person, and I think with programming you do a lot of coding and troubleshooting with computers. And so I got into teaching, and I always loved math, and it was the first thing I went to. And so I got a master's in math education from the University of Bridgeport, and then a PhD in math education from Illinois State University. And since then, I've been an educator. I taught middle school. I was a math administrator throughout different districts in Connecticut, Bridgeport, Ansonia, Middletown. And so I just have a love of math, but mostly I have a love of teaching students math. And now in my current position as professor at Central Connecticut State University, I teach teachers. I teach pre-service teachers, and those are people who want to become teachers. And for elementary school teachers, I take them back. And I know you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, but can you teach it to children?
Yeah.
And so we go back and we learn the basics, and we learn why you're doing these steps, not just the steps, but the why. And so I really enjoy that. And I also work with in-service teachers. So those are teachers that are currently teaching. And I work with middle school and high school teachers. And I work with them on their methods of teaching.
Okay.
And that's another thing that I like to do a lot, is really help teachers teach so that students want to learn math, and so that students can see the beauty of math and not just that, oh, math is hard.
Well, the thing is, I'm going to go back just a little bit to what you originally started talking about. You started, when you first went in the classroom, you said you were in middle school. Did you do high school? I can't remember.
No, I taught middle school.
Just middle school.
Yes.
So when you first went into middle school, was it in an urban area?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so what did you see when you started dealing with the kids?
Well, I mean, the first thing I saw was, so first of all, I taught in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and it was also where I grew up. Now, I didn't teach in the part of town that I grew up in. But the thing I saw is that the math wasn't necessarily relevant to the students. But I always made it relevant. And I think many teachers do that. They try to make the curriculum relevant. I taught math, so I tried to make that relevant. But the thing that I was missing was that I only saw students in my class, and I saw them as a math student. And I didn't realize when I first started teaching that students were different in different classes.
Yes, they are.
And I saw students outside of math class, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I said, "Oh, you talk?" And so I said, "Well, what's up with my class? I have to figure out how can I get these students to want to engage with the math." And so I had a student, Larry, and he liked to draw. And the reason I know that is because he wasn't paying attention to the math. So I went to the back of the room, and I looked down, and Larry was truly an artist. And I said, "My goodness, he's an artist." I said, "So what I'll do is I'll make sure that he's involved in anything that has to do with ratio and proportions and anything that has to do with drawing. Larry's going to be in charge." And so that's what I did. And that was a way to pull Larry in. And also just getting to know them outside of the classroom helps as well.
And, you know, that is so important. And another thing for me, too, was getting to know, working with their teachers. Because you said Larry was an artist.
Yes.
If you had went down and talked to his art teacher, if he took art, you would have, I mean, you probably did, you seeing the whole different side of that student. Because that's one of the things I did. I would talk to the English teacher, the math teacher, the social studies teacher, to, you know, make sure I knew what they were teaching. Because there's one thing about science, it all goes together, and a lot of times in mathematics. And I know when I taught math, I'm going to say this because this is something that I saw a lady that you met today, Miss Bean, do when we taught together at Dunbar Middle. Okay. It was either her or another math teacher. Instead of just doing numbers, they had the kids write the word, like 2 + 2 = 4. Yes. They had to do it in writing form as opposed to just doing it with the numbers, because that was how they were tested. Yes. They use words a lot on the test as opposed to just numbers, and the kids had to be able to deal with that.
Well, that exposes kids to all the kinds of things that they're going to run into. Right?
Yes.
And so what we want to do is we want to have math in context.
Yes.
We don't only want it to be numbers.
Yes.
So the numbers are important, but we want students to know that math is everywhere. You're going to see it everywhere. And how they see it on the test is important. Yes. And so they have to be exposed to that. So, yes, I definitely agree with that what we want to do as much as possible. I taught a class this summer with middle school students, and I hadn't taught in a classroom in a long time. And so one of the things I did was I had a theme each day. And I had math and art. I had math and music. And each of the days, math and science. And so each day we worked on different themes, but there was always math involved, but it was connected to a context. And it was connected to a theme. And it really helps students to see the math.
Yes, yes.
And it helps them to see how it's applied and how they use it in real life.
Well, I mean, think about it in art. You know, what concepts did you use when you did the math and art?
I started with an artist, Sol LeWitt, I think that's his name, and he was actually from Connecticut, and we used different shapes. So we started with shapes, any kinds of polygons, trapezoids or parallelograms, and we started with shapes, but then we had things like symmetry. So you might have directions to say, you know, draw whatever it is, 4 polygons, and make sure that they're symmetric. And so you had all of these different criteria for the students to make a drawing. So it was artistic, but at the same time there was math involved. You're talking about transformations. I might say, make a slide, a flip, or a turn. And in math, we would say a rotation or a translation or a reflection. And so the students were learning the math vocabulary, but at the same time, they were able to make something artistic so that each child had a different piece of artwork at the end, but they followed the directions of the math.
That makes so much sense.
And they love it because it's something fun that they can do.
And it not only takes in the stress of math, because, you know, a lot of students from all walks stress out because of math. And so it made it in a whole different context of something they wouldn't have even thought about.
Yes, yes.
You know.
I had one of the students that at the beginning of the week, I could tell he was a student that would probably say he didn't like math. I didn't ever ask him that because I didn't even want to hear it. And by the end of the week, he was one of the ones that got up and did his presentation. And not only did he do the presentation, but he took questions and he was able to answer the questions that people asked. And he was so proud. And so, Nate, anyway, I love it. I love to see that when kids realize, oh, I can do this.
Yes.
You see a certain sparkle. You see them like coming out of their shell to know that they can do it. You just might have to find a different way of helping them to see that they can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in working with teachers, you say you do pre-serve teachers and you work with
practicing
teachers.
Uh-huh.
So let's look at pre-serve teachers. When you're working with them in math, what are some of the things that you try to get them to know and understand?
I work a lot with fractions.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't necessarily like working with fractions. You know, they can shade fractions. I can show you a half. I can show you 3/4. But when it comes to fraction operations, many times students get confused. So one of the things I do is I start off with just saying, okay, let's compare fractions. And you think it's easy, but I say to them, you cannot make it a decimal. You cannot change it to a decimal. You cannot make common denominators. But I want you to compare the fractions without doing that. How can you do that?
Oh,
we begin to talk about, well, what's the numerator mean in the fraction? It's the number of pieces. What's the denominator? It's the size of the pieces. And, okay, what can we compare fractions to? Most fractions are less than 1. Not all, but most fractions are less than 1. So the fraction might be closer to 0, closer to a half, or closer to 1. And so we begin to talk about that. And rather than just doing something, some operation, I get them to think about the fraction first, talk about it. And then they begin to compare the fractions, and they begin to see that, oh, I could do this. But they're just looking at it in a different way, because when they were taught, many times students are just taught a procedure.
Yes, yes.
Make a common denominator. Oh, how do I do that? I multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number. Okay, but why do you do that? Like, what does it mean? Can you show me in a picture? And so that's what I have the students do. And I show them how to multiply with the fractions. We use paper folding. I say, well, what does a half of 3/4 mean? Right? 1/2 times 3/4. Well, they can just get the answer. They multiply the numerators, they multiply the denominators, but they don't know where it comes from. So I have them fold paper. I say, okay, let's say take a half of a piece of paper. So I fold it in half. Now fold it in fourths and shade 3 of those pieces. You're taking a piece of a piece. And that's why you end up with a fraction that's smaller, even though you're multiplying. And so we do things that are visual so that they can see it and that they can understand it a little better, so that when they teach students that, you know, they understand it rather than just showing a procedure.
And, you know, that's right, because back in the day, when a lot of teachers say, this is a formula, this is how you use it, and this is how you're supposed to do it. And it may have 6 steps.
Yes.
But if a kid can do it in 4, wait a minute, you can do it in 4, show me how you did it in 4. And they come up with the correct answer, and they can do some other problems and continue to come up, you know, okay, you just learned another way.
I'm fine with that.
I am too.
I never say you have to do it my way, as long as you can explain it.
Yep, I love that. Yep. Hey, Danita Bailey's online. Her and her husband own a math tutoring company. They are awesome.
You probably know what I'm talking about.
David sure will. But you know, teachers have to learn how to deal with not only the classroom discipline, but also how to make the learning interesting. Yes. And just to say, do it because I said so, may not always work in a classroom.
Right. So. It might work for some students, but not for all. And I believe when the students are engaged, it helps with the discipline problem.
It does.
Because the students are engaged. They actually want to do it. They want to try to figure it out. So.
Now, you know, as I've been talking to you over the years, I want to bring into light your TED Talk.
Okay.
What was your TED Talk about? I'm going to let you tell them because they've seen it on my Facebook page.
Okay, so my TED Talk was about culturally relevant pedagogy, a critical need.
It sounds like a lot, y'all, but she going to tell us.
Okay, so pedagogy is just a method of teaching. How do you teach, right? So we want to make it more culturally relevant. And I say that just to mean that, sure, we want to bring in student interest. Most teachers bring in student interest, but they forget about the community sometimes.
Yes.
So,
oh, okay.
And so part of culturally relevant pedagogy is learning about the whole child, right? Learning about the student. Not just what they like. We do want to learn about that, but we also want to know what's going on in the community. What does the student do with their families? You know, what kind of vacations do you take? Not because we're being nosy, but because we want to bring that in. Because when you begin to bring in information about students, and they, especially stuff they don't think you know, and you bring in some information, and they look up like, oh, how you know that? You know, but it's knowing it in a positive way.
Yes. To
bring it in so that we can make some connections with the math. Like sometimes it's just the context of the problem. So I might talk about like if I know your student does a family reunion every year, I might bring in a math problem that has to do with a family reunion. You know, how many people are attending, how much would it cost to buy the food, and so forth.
Sound like my family reunion, but
yeah.
But yeah, and that makes sense. And you do it in a positive way.
Always. Part of culturally relevant pedagogy is empowering students. And if you think about it, I asked teachers, I said, what are you doing in your classroom? If you give a student a worksheet, how does it empower that student? If you can't answer that question, why do you need that worksheet?
Okay, we got someone calling in. Hold on.
Okay.
Hello, this is Dr. Mary Payton and All About STEM Radio. Who am I talking to?
You are speaking to Sean Jones. I was calling for my cousin, Shelly.
Okay, Shelly, this is your cousin.
Hi, Sean.
Hi. I just want to let everybody know I'm so proud of her. And I'm trying to get her to come to Minnesota for my group home for the girls that I'm opening up. So I'm going to be talking to her. And I'm just, like I said, I want to let the world know I am very proud of her and love her to death.
Love you too. And of course, I'm going to come to Minnesota.
Okay. And you got to sign my book, too.
I will do that.
All righty.
All right. Thank you for calling, Sean.
And you got all my support.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You gotta love family, right?
Oh, yeah. Bye-bye, Sean. Most definitely. Because, hey, they're your support and your backbone.
Absolutely. I had a book signing in Atlanta. I went back to Spelman for a homecoming, and my parents live in Florida, so my niece drove them up to the book signing, and it was so special to have them there.
Hey, I mean, they probably looked at, that's my baby, because I know if my mother was still with us, she would be embarrassing.
Over the moon.
That's my baby, look. But, and that's how I am toward my kids, because they will look at me and like, oh, goodness. We just love her. Just let her go forth. But hey, I'm loving what you're doing. And I mean, TED Talk, university professor, got a book, working with teachers, because teachers need a lot of help. Even not just help when they're in college and doing their student teaching, but even after they graduate. So do you get the opportunities to do any professional developments or conference speakings or anything like that?
Yes. Actually, Friday I'll be having a talk at the CMC, that's the California Math Council South. I'll be at their conference to talk to teachers there. And then I attend the National Council of Teachers of Math conference mostly every year, and I speak at that conference as well. And so, I go to conferences, and I also speak at school districts. So sometimes school districts have me come in. And just recently, I worked with New Haven and Hamden Public Schools in Connecticut. Okay. And specifically on culturally relevant pedagogy. And one of the first things we do is we just talk about, well, what does it mean to you? Like, what do you already think it means? and we kind of go through that. And then I give the definition based on Gloria Latson-Billings, because that's whose definition? Work I follow. Excuse me?
What is that definition, if you don't mind?
Well, okay, so the definition of culturally relevant pedagogy is it's a pedagogy that empowers students intellectually, socially, academically, right, and politically. I don't want to forget that part.
Okay.
And so when she talks about empowering students, that's a big part of it. So it's more than just doing stuff that students like, but it's how can this math change your life?
Yes.
How can you use this math to empower you to do things that you want to do in your life? Because math, Bob Moses says, it's a civil rights issue. Because, you know, math many times divides us between the haves and the have-nots.
Yes.
If you're able to take that calculus as a high school senior, and then when you get to college, you have an advantage of students that weren't able to do that. And many times it's because of access, not because they couldn't do it, but because they don't have access to the right right math instruction.
Yes.
And sometimes even access to the course itself because of tracking.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and you're so right, because you know education that you get up here in Dallas-Fort Worth can be different than what you get down in, let's say, Palestine or Waco or something like that, because you got a smaller town. They don't have millions of houses and millions of cars. So how do you make that relevant to those kids down there and have the same outcome?
Yeah.
I mean, that's extremely, extremely important. But, we were talking about you, going out and, speaking and visiting schools. You've already visited a couple of schools here in Texas.
Yes, I did. I started off in Lubbock, Texas.
Okay.
And I went to Irvine Elementary School in Lubbock, Texas. And I actually visited Lubbock with Dr. Reagan Higgins. And she is a professor at Texas Tech. And the reason I was with Reagan is she is one of the mathematicians featured in my book.
Okay.
And so she went with me to the school, and we worked with some students there around my book. So we helped the students see some of the women in my book to learn about them. And then I did the same thing here at the Young Women's Leadership Academy. And so in Lubbock, I was with third graders.
Okay.
And that was interesting because I haven't been with third graders in a long time. But then here in Fort Worth, I was with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And that was more my speed because I taught middle school. And it's always interesting because I just want to teach students that the field of mathematics is more diverse than you think.
It is.
It is. And there are mathematicians out there that we should know about, and we know that based on Hidden Figures. And that kind of brought to light, wow, how did we not know about these women? And so based on that, that's where my book came from. That at least it was inspired by Hidden Figures.
And that's what I was getting ready to ask you was, wait a minute, if you're just joining me, I need to say this. If you're just joining me, I have the outstanding pleasure of interviewing Dr. Shelly Jones. She's from Connecticut. She is a math professor there. What college are you at?
Central Connecticut State University. From
Central Connecticut State University. And she is here to talk about, mathematics, culturally relevant math, and she has a book out, and we're going to talk about that in just a second.
Okay.
But going back to your visit with Marsha Bean, that's who I couldn't remember. Marsha. That's okay.
Oh, no, she said just one Marsha.
I know she's gonna give me because Hope is gonna say, Mary was talking about you on her show last night. But when you went to the Young Women's Leadership Academy, which is like one of the schools in Fort Worth that I just love, but I love all my schools in Fort Worth. What was the reception that you received from so many of our young ladies?
I loved it, first of all. Just walking in there and the fact that it was all young women, okay? They had a sign up, welcome women who count. So I met with 4 groups today, and they range from groups of 15 to 50 students. And it was just lovely. They listened intently. They asked great questions.
Oh, yes.
And they just wanted to know more about me, more about my book, more about women in the book. And they just had some really good questions. What made me stick with math? You know, all kinds of questions that I can't think of all the questions right now, but they just really stayed engaged with it. I mean, I met with each group for an hour and a half.
Oh.
And the hour and a half went by so fast because I did a PowerPoint and I talked about the book. I did a video. I showed them a video from the National Science Foundation with Dr. Talitha Washington, who is featured in my book. And Dr. Talitha Washington encourages young girls to go with STEM. And she said she didn't even like math at first. And she was almost failing a class, so she dropped it, but she stuck with it. And that's what students need to know. They need to know that it doesn't always work the first time.
Right, right.
But if you stick with it, then you can do it. But the reception was overwhelmingly positive.
But the thing is, that you say stick with it, but the more you learn about it, how it works, why you do certain things is what you mentioned earlier. Then you gain a better understanding of, what the processes are, what the utilizations are, because I've had students say, I don't know why I'm taking algebra, I'll never use it. You use it every day.
You actually do use it, yeah.
You use it every day. Yeah. For us ladies, if there's a sale, how much am I going to really save based on what the sale is when you add the taxes?
Yes.
And should I buy in bulk?
Percent difference.
Yeah. All of that. And we use it every day, and a lot of people don't even realize it. But
I was talking to a nurse one day. I was at a talk, and she says, "Oh, I'm not good at math." And I looked at her and I said, "You are good at math." And then she realized what she was saying, and she says, "Oh, but that's different." I said, "No, that's math."
We have someone else calling. Hold on. Hello, this is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. Who am I talking to? Hello?
Hi, is this Mary?
Huh?
Hi, is this Mary?
Yes, it is.
Hey, Mary, it's David Bailey. How's it going?
Hey, what? This is David.
Hey.
He owns the math tutoring company in Mansfield. Hey, David.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey, so good. How are you? Hey, I'm so fascinated by your guest today. Sorry, my voice is, with the weather change, my voice is kind of shady sounding. But the question is, so I teach middle school, algebra 1 and geometry. And I noticed that typically between grades 5 and 8 is when you tend to see girls dropping in mathematics. My understanding that statistically girls perform stronger in the primary level than when they get to middle school. There's a shift as far as taking the higher level courses. Even in my classes, I have more boys than girls in my algebra 1 section. And just want to get her thoughts on why is that, and then 2, what can I do? What can teachers do to encourage young girls to stay in mathematics? Because I don't think it's an ability issue. I don't know, maybe intimidation. I don't know. But I can take your answer off the air, but just love to get your thoughts on that. Thanks a lot, and I'll catch up with you later, Mary, okay?
Okay, David. All right.
So, do you want me to answer that? So I have a couple of things I can say about that. Around 4th grade, when they ask girls if they like math and science, about 66% of girls say yes. By the time they get to college, that number has dropped to 18%. So something happens between then. And I'll say this. One thing happens is the math gets harder. Let's face it.
Yes.
After 5th grade, the math gets harder. The other thing is I don't think girls are encouraged to do math as much as boys are. If you ask math teachers about mathematicians, you'll hear about Pythagoras, you'll hear about Gauss, you'll hear about Euler. You won't hear about Katherine Johnson. You won't hear about women in math. You won't hear about Evelyn Boyd Granville. And so girls need to see themselves in the math. right? There's this thing called the window and mirror effect. I want to learn about others, but I also need to see myself.
Yes.
Right? And so girls don't see themselves. The other thing is boys tend to be socialized to take more risk than girls do. And so what can we do? We can change that. We can begin to help girls to take risk, because it's risky in math class. It's risky to get a math answer wrong. But if you help students to understand that getting the math answer wrong is okay. And in fact, when you get it wrong is when you learn something. If you already know the answer, you already know it. It's when you get the answer wrong that you learn something. So there's this thing called my favorite no. And what the teacher can do is they can go around the classroom and they can look for their favorite no. And what that is it's an answer that's wrong, but there's some good stuff in it. And so then the teacher can show it, and the students begin to see that it's okay to make a mistake. And the teacher says, "Ooh, this is my favorite no." And they show the no, and they say, "Let's see, what did this student do right? This student has some good math." And the students say what the student did right. And they say, and then the teacher will ask, "Okay, what did the student do wrong? What can we help this student to do to make this right?" And then they say that. This way, you're acknowledging that the student did do something right, but there might be something that's small that's wrong. And so they begin to see that it's okay to make a mistake, because I call it my favorite no. There's something good in it that I like as a teacher. So there's all these little things that you can do, but I think girls really need to see themselves. And and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I'm featuring all women mathematicians, because I think girls need to see themselves.
Okay. His wife, Danita, said, "Oh, that's good. My favorite no." That's what she wrote. And then, hey, Anna, she's on with one of my neighbors, and Tommy just popped up. So we got a lot of people coming on to listen to you today.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Something that I noticed in math classes is girls will raise their hand when they know they have the correct answer.
Yes.
Boys will raise their hands. They don't care if it's right or wrong. They just want to raise their hand, and that means they're taking a risk. And we have to teach girls to do that as well.
You're right. I mean, even working with my 4-year-olds now, because I always taught middle school and high school, and now that I'm retired, I volunteer at Hill Elementary and work with their 4-year-olds in science. I asked a question, and there is like 1 or 2 girls that will always raise their hand, but all of the boys will raise their hands when it comes to doing stuff. You are so right. But I want to go back to your book now. How many ladies do you have in your book?
I have 29 mathematicians in the book.
Wow.
And they span all the way from 1943, was the first African-American female to earn a PhD in math, and her name is Euphemia Lofton-Haynes, all the way up until I feature even contemporary. I call them contemporary first.
Yes.
Because they're teaching now.
Yes.
And actually, some of them are professors and teachers, but they have many different careers. Even though they're mathematicians, they have many different careers.
And see, that was one of the things I liked about your book is I find several books on STEM and women in STEM, and even on men in STEM, that a lot of the people are no longer with us. You don't have a lot of those contemporary people in there. And, you know, it's kind of like, okay, we did this years ago and then we stopped. So it's like, who's doing it now? And that's what I like about your book. Yeah. So let's talk about some of your early people. Who was one of your most, one of the people that you really connected with from your early people?
Okay, so I connected with, well, first of all, the first, Euphemia Lofton-Haynes, she was just the first. So I was just wowed by her because in 1943, she actually graduated from Smith College. So think about this. In the 40s, it was segregation.
Oh, yeah.
And so Smith College said, well, we're going to let the colored girls come anyway because we're a liberal college. And so she was able to go to college way back in the 40s when most black people weren't going to college.
Yep.
And so that was one of the pioneers that I really connected with. But I connected with Evelyn Boyd Granville. And the reason why is she says, well, I want people to know that black girls can do math too. and she just felt like she never had things against her. She just felt like, I'm going to do it because I want to do it. She said she never felt like she couldn't do it. You know, her parent didn't tell her she couldn't do it, and she just felt she could always do it. And I got to meet her last year, and she's 94 years old.
What?
Yep, she's 94 years old, and she's the second African-American female to earn a doctorate in math. And she earned that doctorate from Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. And so she's like sort of like my homegirl.
I see your book is in the window. Can you pull it out so people can see? I love that book. You've had that cover forever. Yes. I love that cover.
And I didn't start with this cover though. I had a different cover, and then I had a student from Central Connecticut State University, Donald Collins, and I said, just make me a book cover. Show me what you can do. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is Etta Faulkner.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Etta Faulkner, and she's also featured in the book, the late Dr. Etta Faulkner, and she's also featured in the book. But this is actually a photo of her.
Okay. Can you put the book like in front of the mic, because it's kind of covered by the mic? I know, y'all. I'm being informal.
Do the Etta Faulkner.
I love that. And so, you know, tell me a little bit about Etta Faulkner since you've got her on the cover.
Okay. All right, so Dr. Faulkner, she had a long career at Spelman College, almost 40 years at Spelman College.
Did you take her?
I did not.
Okay.
When I went to Spelman, I was in the dual degree program.
Okay.
And so many of my courses were at Morehouse and Clark.
Okay.
And at that time, in the early 80s, they did not have the computer science department yet. And Dr. Faulkner is one of the ones who was instrumental in getting that at Spelman College.
Okay.
And now Spelman College is known for things like their robotics clubs and things like that. But Dr. Faulkner, she was instrumental in one of the things that she wanted to do was get more girls in STEM, and specifically African American girls, because she worked at Spelman College, which is a historically black college. And so that's one of the things Etta Faulkner did.
Okay. All right. What was I going to say? About the book, you know, your book is, it tells about all of your, you know, ladies in math, but it also gives activities for the students to do. But before I get there, tell me your contemporary person that you most connect with.
I would say it's Dr. Talitha Washington. And you know what? There's always a reason. And with Dr. Washington, she was actually the first person who I contacted. The first one of the contemporaries. And I said, will you be in my book? I'm writing this book. And it was early on. And she said, yes, of course. And I went down to D.C. for a meeting. And there she was, because she works at Howard University. And she came over to the meeting, and I didn't even know she was coming. And so we met for the first time because we had done all of our talking via email.
Like me and you.
Yes. And I met her, and she's just a fireball, and I really love her. I mean, she's really interested in getting people of color in STEM, and also specifically women, too.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that is so, so awesome. Now, in writing this book, how did you connect with people? You just called them and asked, and so how did that process go? Because we're getting into the book writing part now.
Yeah. Okay, so when I first started, first of all, I saw the movie Hidden Figures and was blown away. And I had previously thought about writing the book. And after I saw the movie, I said, oh, wow, I have to do this. And so I began to just Google African American women mathematicians. And I came across a website called Mathematicians of the African Diaspora.
Okay, absolutely.
And it was a great website, and I started there. I was able to find many of the women, and even some of the contemporary women are on that website. And so I began to look these women up. And then the contemporary women I contacted directly through email. Facebook. I mean, there's just all these ways to contact people now. And so I did that, and people got back to me. They got back to me, and they said, yes, I would like to be involved. And I said, well, send me a picture and send me your bio. And then I asked them some other questions, because bios tend to be just about the awards that you got. Yes. And I wanted to know more about, like, what do they want for young girls, and what are some things that are just interesting that you like to do. And so part of that was what I wanted to show in the book was that these are just real people, and they have all different kinds of jobs, and they like different things, but they just happen to all be mathematicians.
Okay. Now, what are some of the things that they do? I know I've gone on a whole different series of questions, but what are some of the things that your teachers, the
mathematicians.
Your mathematicians do?
Yeah. So, so we know about the hidden figures.
Yes.
So those mathematicians, they did, for instance, like Dr. Christine Darden. She's in the book Hidden Figures, but not in the movie. And so she did work with NASA, and she did work on sonic boom.
Yeah.
And the sonic boom was so loud that it would just shatter things. And so she did a lot of work to help them be able to do the sonic boom. So that was her. Then we have, I think it's Monica Jackson. She does work with, she uses math to look at populations across whatever, like let's say the United States.
Yeah.
And so she has math to look at that. And so you could use math to look at diseases. I think who was it that was talking the other day? It was Erica Graham, but also I think it was Monica. But anyway, so there are different, you can actually use math, like let's say Talia Mail. She uses math to look at hurricane surges.
Okay.
So she looked at the hurricane surges from Katrina, for instance. And what you use the math to predict some of these things of how far is that hurricane surge going to be?
Yes.
And so the math is not, I think some people think if you learn math and if you study math to get a PhD, you're going to be a professor. Yes, you can be a professor. That's what I do. But there are all these other things that you can do as well. And I know on the website for CCSU, was my school, Central Connecticut State University, we have a whole list of different careers that you can use with math. And so we just want to help students to see that there are all these different careers that you can use math for. Math and physics is very closely related.
Yes.
So if you're good at math, you could be a physicist as well. All right? And so that was one of the things that Christine Darden found. A lot of the work that she did as an engineer was very close to the physics that she learned, and but yet she was a mathematician. And so there's just so many connections. There's connections with the math and the science.
Oh, yes.
And there's connections with math and all these other things that people do in their careers, but they use math to do it.
And you're so right. When we talk about math and science. Something happened. I don't know. When we talk about math and science, when we're doing pressure, when we're doing gas laws, when we're doing population studies, all of that is math. And a lot of people don't look at that. All they think about is trigonometry, geometry, and all of that. When we talk about genetics and we're looking at diversity, all of that is mathematics. And you have people who work in those areas. So, there's a lot that you can do.
Yes.
But, based on your background and your career and this book, I want you to hold, for some reason, our little emblem is covering your book.
Oh,
so.
Okay. And also, I can't hear anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, something happened on this end.
Okay.
But, so scoot your book that way. Yeah.
That's good.
So, I'm going to see in a second. But, now that you're at this point in your life, what would you want to tell young people, men, women, whichever, especially young women, what bit of information would you want to give them about going into the areas of math?
You don't have to be fast at math.
Right. Okay.
You just have to be steady, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so math is so many things.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you were talking about, the trig, the
Mm-hmm.
geometry, and those things, that is called school math. And
Yes.
and you need that. You
Yes.
need school math. But we need to broaden our thoughts about what math is so that we can see the connections to why we use math.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be careful to say that math is not just only applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. But some of math is creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
of math is some math we don't even know yet.
Yes.
Math can be created. And so we don't want students to think that math is only used for applications,
Mm-hmm.
but we do want them to see that math is used for applications, So I would say that if math is something you think you like, to pursue it,
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, find a support group.
Mm-hmm.
Because many students, they will study alone and they're not doing good at math.
Yes. Yes.
You need to find a support group. Find somebody to study with. Go see your teacher for extra help. Get
Mm-hmm.
extra help outside of the classroom, right? But I think most of all, it's just open your mind to the fact that math is not just only what you see, on a worksheet. It's a way of thinking. When I look at different things like a honeycomb or
Mm-hmm.
even a leaf on a tree, I see math.
Yes.
Because I see the symmetry,
Okay.
and I see the patterns. When I look at floor tiles,
Mm-hmm.
I see patterns.
Okay.
So, there's just math everywhere.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Hey, y'all, we're almost over time, but that's okay. Where can someone get your book? Can you scoot your book closer to you? I don't know. It's yeah, right there. This thing is in the way.
It's the American Mathematical Society is the publisher, and
Okay.
it's called the AMS Bookstore. So ams.org,
Okay.
and then they could go to the bookstore. They can also get it on Amazon.
Okay, it
but
is on
probably the AMS Bookstore is a little faster.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen it on Amazon because I looked it up. But I am so happy about this book because this book has been a while coming. You
Yes,
told me
yes.
about this book 2 years ago.
Yes.
You know what? You were on the second week in November in 2017.
17.
Mm-hmm. So this is your week.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, hey, you're going to have to get this book, look her up, Dr. Shelly Jones. She teaches in Connecticut. What's the school?
Central Connecticut State University.
Central Connecticut State University. And, hey, get involved in math, do all those wonderful things. And all you listeners, Stephonia, everybody out there, thank y'all for chiming in. Danita Bailey and everyone, thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next week will be another All About STEM Radio. So until then, bye-bye. My producer's in here throwing me out.